let's begin by talking about what 3D models are and what forms those models can take within 3ds Max. So when we talk about 3D models here in the context of our projects, what we're basically talking about is 3 different categories in most cases. So the characters that we create that we're going to be rigging and animating and using in our final pieces, those are going to be created as 3D models. Okay, the environments that they interact with, so if it's a landscape, a cliff face, a house, a building, those things are all going to have to be created as 3D models. And then props, so any weaponry that they're going to be carrying, any accessories that they're going to have with them that they're going to be manipulating, those are going to be created as 3D models as well. And those are going to be the three main categories of models in our 3D projects. You have other things like effects and matte paintings and things like that that can be composited in to create the final look. But typically those 3 categories will encompass the 3D models that we'll be creating. Now here in 3ds Max, there are a few different ways that those 3D models can be created, or different sort of types of geometry. So let's take a look at those types. So the first thing we'll look at here, and this is lesson_2_start. If you want to open it, you don't have to. You can just kind of watch because we're just kind of really looking at some different examples here. We're not going to really be going step by step to create anything, at least yet. So we'll go ahead and take a look at this cube shape. And this cube is a polygon object. So we can think of a polygon object as kind of the most basic form of 3D model that we can have here. Don't think so much about the shape. We're just talking about the sort of the type of geometry this is. So we hear the term geometry, we're just talking about the model itself, okay, and how it's built. So looking at this, we have, look at the top here, we have these 4 corners, and each of these points is defined by a specific X, Y, and Z coordinate in 3D space. Okay, so there's specific numbers associated with where this point is in 3D space. We can move around it and see it goes along with it. Okay, now those points, and we'll talk about all of these sub-objects and what these are called and how it's actually built up a little bit later, but basically these points are connected by lines here, and then when these lines connect, they form a polygon or face. Okay, now the smallest form of a polygon, or the fewest number of lines that can define a polygon, are 3. So you can see if you've just got 2 points here, you've just got a line. So you have to have at least 3 points. And this is known as a triangle, obviously, or tri. And then a 4-sided polygon face, we can call that a quad. And you can also have polygon faces that have more than 4 sides as well. Okay, but basically no matter what kind of geometry we use, typically when we render it or create our final image, it's all going to be broken down into these sort of smallest little divisions here, or these triangles. Okay, and you can see as we move over, you can have a different shape defined by the same types of polygons here. So we still have points and lines, and we have the visible part, the polygons or the faces, but it's in a much different configuration, and it's giving us a different shape. So in this case, instead of a cube, we have a sphere. Okay, same thing here. We're getting a much different shape, but still using the same pieces, or the same building blocks. You can see on top here we have one big polygon, and it's actually defined by a number of edges. So it's kind of a circle shape. And so this is what we can call an n-gon, n being any number over 4. Okay, so we've got our triangles, we've got quads with the 4 sides, and then our n-gons which had multiple sides here. So those are polygons, and we'll get into more of working with polygons a little bit later. We also have NURBS, and so if we select this NURB surface, you can see it doesn't look much different from the polygon surfaces. So the way that 3ds Max deals with NURBS, typically we're going to be viewing what's called a tessellated mesh underneath. So basically we're taking the NURBS object and calculating what that polygon surface will look like underneath. But really, NURBS are created a little bit more with math versus a polygon, which has very explicit locations for the points, and it's very concrete. The NURBS is going to be a little bit more mathematically inclined. So if we take, for instance, one of these points and move it out, you can see it kind of calculates the smooth surface between those points to create our object. And there are different tools for creating using NURBS. but it is good for some specific actions and specific types of models. You can create, lathe surfaces that kind of spin around a particular axis and so forth. So it has its value. If we move over, we can see that this is a patch object. And so you can see it's very smooth. We're not seeing so much the surface underneath. If we go ahead and take a look in here, you can see the points lie outside of the surface, much like the NURBS piece does. If we take a look at those points, they don't really lie on the surface, okay? It's more of a cage that's controlling the geometry underneath, and that's going to become a common theme here. So with the NURBS and then also with the patch, we're looking at the pieces not necessarily lying on the surface, okay? Now, one thing that's a little bit different here is that we actually have handles on our patch that we can move around. So if you've ever used something like Illustrator where you've got Bezier curves, with the handles here, it's going to be very similar. So we can actually change how those curves interact with one another. And again, once we're done building with our patches, we can convert that into a polygon surface. Now, beyond NURBS and patches, we also have a sort of subdivision surface workflow. And this can be created in a number of different ways, but the main idea is that we have a polygon mesh like this that we can model on, and it's used to create a smooth surface. So it's taking that hard-edged surface and calculating a smooth surface underneath it, okay? And so if we turn this off, you can see that this is the original polygon surface, and then here it is smooth. So that if we were to go in and do some modeling, you can see we actually, in much the same way as our NURBS model had, these are actually off of the surface, and we can use those to define the smooth surface underneath. So some calculations are happening behind the scenes to give us our smooth result, okay? And this workflow is going to be a very popular workflow, and it's going to be something that you're definitely going to want to utilize, because you want to have the power of working with polygons and all the modeling that you can do with polygons, but you still want to have a nice smooth surface at the end without having to go in and manually add all of those polygons. So this sort of smoothing works really well. And there are a number of ways to get to this point. You can see that this one uses the subdivision surface rollout and just turning on or off the NURBS subdivision here. We also have this object, and we'll talk about using the stack here, the modifier stack, but this just has a mesh smooth applied, and you can see here this is our original polygon, and this is this resulting smooth surface, okay? And under here you can see it's using the subdivision method, NURBS. You can change the number of iterations and make it smoother, but we can go ahead and modify those points, and you can see the surface underneath changes. So again, very similar to this object that we looked at here, using, well, with just the checkbox on. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of the different types of models that we can have. So hopefully you get a little bit of, if nothing else, understanding what some of the terms mean. And so the next thing that we want to do is to look at how we can start to work with our models. So creating models, you look at the Create panel, talking about primitives, what different types of models we can create, and then also talking about working in the modifier stack, and then bringing in models using import. So we'll start to look at that in the next lesson.